For the better part of the last decade, Acura has had a specialized lineup, a smaller lineup of vehicles that are geared towards buyers looking for attainable luxury and maybe even a sports-tuned driving experience. So when Acura brought in the ADX to the lineup, there were many questions, despite the fact that we have the Integra, which is just a rebadged Honda Civic, but those same questions made its way towards this subcompact crossover. Why is it an HRV? Why doesn't it have a great engine? Why am I going to spend $40,000 or more out of an ADX when I could choose a BMW X1, an Audi Q3, a Volvo XC40? Well, those questions were answered very quickly within a year, because here we are in 2026, we have a full year of production, and believe it or not, the Acura ADX is outselling that X1, that Audi Q3, that Mercedes-Benz GLA. It has become one of the hottest selling subcompact crossovers in the US. And I'm trying to figure out why. I've been living with this ADX for a week now, and there's been some surprises. There's been things I liked, but there's also things I don't really like that Acura needs to go back to the drawing board and address, because I do think that we are a couple corporate decisions away to making this vehicle really spectacular in this market. So in today's video, we're going to discover what the ADX has to offer us in 2026. We're going to take a good long look at the exterior, the interior, take it out for a test drive, and I'll give you guys my thoughts on this vehicle after a week of driving it around, because it just might be a great choice for you if you are looking for an affordable luxury crossover, but also one that is practical and multidimensional. So as always, let's begin with that pricing. For the Acura ADX we're taking a look at today, this is the A-Spec Advance, coming in at a starting cost of right around $44,000. This is the top of the range model in the lineup. You can go with the base and A-Spec between $37,000 and $41,000, which I think most buyers are going in that direction, because at $37,000, that severely undercuts most of the German competitors in this market, even the Volvo XC40, and this will be seen as a more valuable option compared to the Lexus UX, which is only a hybrid and much smaller than what we have here today out of this vehicle. This is a traditional subcompact crossover, giving you better interior space and overall practicality. As you take a look at the exterior, yes, there is most certainly HRV styling here, especially with the body lines and that rear fascia. But as you take a look at the side profile, it is 6 inches longer. It is a longer vehicle, and you're going to notice that with the front hood, that really extends outward. And also for the interior, it's going to be a bit more space, so probably more practical than that HRV. Also, Acura did work their magic, making this subcompact look sporty, aggressive, and as upscale as they could possibly make it without going too far where it's just a little too much for most consumers in this segment. Up front, you are going to receive full LED headlights and LED daytime running lights, also fog lights for better visibility at night or in adverse weather conditions. One of the nice features that we have here aesthetically is this front grille. It's almost like a vortex where everything gets sucked into that Acura emblem, and it really gives you a nice sporty and aggressive appearance up front. What I also like too is how Acura was able to use multicolors for the exterior, and it all blends in together really nicely. You're going to notice the gloss black trim for the lower portion of the front bumper outlining those fog lights, and then you also have this nice aluminum look here for the front bumper itself. You're going to see that throughout, not only for the exterior but also the interior as well. As we make our way over to the side profile, you're going to notice the gloss black trim once again for the wheel arches, much like we see out of the HRV. So this is not going to be an off-road tuned vehicle. It's mostly just suitable for mall terrain. Obviously, we don't have a lot of ground clearance either, but should be enough to take on snow-covered roadways during the winter. With this being the A-Spec Advance, we are going to receive 19-inch alloy wheels in a gloss black look, giving us a lower profile appearance to this model. One of the incentives to choosing the A-Spec over the base. Some people are going to be concerned about the 19-inch wheels. Oh, a bit more road noise, not going to be as comfortable. You guys might be surprised here out of the ADX. Yes, it is based off of the HRV, but its on-road mannerisms are quite polar opposite from what we experienced from Honda out of that HRV. You're going to notice the A-Spec badge on the front fender, letting you know what you have here out of this model, that aggressive appearance, and then you are going to have gloss black side mirror caps with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety, and the side mirrors power fold. Love to see that. Then for the rear fascia, it's all going to be about that spoiler, giving you that hot hatch appearance and really where Acura worked their magic, worked their touch to make the ADX look a bit more unique in the lineup and compared to its more mainstream cousin. What I really like though is the LED taillights that wrap around the fenders, making its way into the center portion of that liftgate. They're LEDs, so found throughout all three trims is going to be LED taillights and headlights, giving you that modern appearance. It's also outlined by gloss black trim. Yes, this does have more of an HRV appearance. In fact, I would argue the rear fascia is pretty much the HRV, but I do like that touch on this model. Also another thing too, and this is very minor, but the fact they didn't darken out the ADX and all-wheel drive badges, that's really nice. It would have looked tacky if they went all lower profile for this vehicle, so kudos to Acura on that one. Then for the lower portion of the rear bumper here, we're going to have gloss black trim, giving us continuity found throughout. And what I really like, I mean, I've probably harped on this a bit too much for just a small aesthetic, is this gray metallic look. We saw that up front. We're seeing that for the rear fascia. A lot of manufacturers would give you a plastic appearance, so I just like that touch. Then we also have dual exhaust outlets, giving us a sportier appearance to this model. But let me know what you think here about the Acura ADX. Is this a good-looking subcompact crossover, or does it have too much of an appearance similar to that HRV? Powering all ADXs is going to be a 1.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. Producing 190 horsepower and 179 pound-feet of torque, it will be paired with a CVT, and we have all-wheel drive for better year-round capability and versatility. Now, out of this engine, it's a bit more peppy than what you're going to find out of the HRV. In fact, you have a bit more fun here. Yes, 0 to 60 times come in at around 8.5 to 9 seconds, but it's also what Acura did to the platform itself to make it a bit more enjoyable, a bit more engaging. When it pertains to fuel economy, you're looking at around 25 miles per gallon in the city and 30 miles per gallon on the highway, which isn't the worst in this market, but we all know that from Honda, from Acura, we can get better because the Civic has a 2-liter hybrid 4-cylinder engine, and I personally would love to see that engine make its way in this crossover. We're going to talk about this later on, but I think a hybrid powertrain is really what this vehicle is missing to be really competitive in this segment. Hopping inside this Acura ADX, we are greeted by power-adjustable heated and ventilated leather trim seats with micro-suede inserts for both the driver and passenger, with the driver's side having 2-position memory for added convenience. In some ways, this could be seen as the only highlight for the interior because this crossover is not beating any allegations. It is most certainly a rebadged Honda HRV, especially when you take a look at the dashboard button layout and even some of the other elements that makes up this crossover. But the seats are most certainly a standout. The ADX is supposed to be a bit more sports tuned, and we're going to talk about this later on during the test drive, that it's almost hot hatch-like. So with these seats, there's going to be a good amount of bolstering, a good amount of support, and they are very comfortable here. Also, another thing too, with the micro-suede inserts, they will be found on the door panels. That is one thing I really do like here about the ADX and what Acura did to the interior. There is an attention to detail. So you're going to notice this multicolor interior for our model, and that pattern is found on the dashboard, door panels, center console. There's some gloss black trim as well. It gives you a bit more definition to the interior, letting you know this is supposed to be a bit more upscale. Also adding to this is going to be your flat-bottomed leather-wrapped steering wheel, which is heated, by the way, giving you aggressive 10 and 2 and firm 9 and 3 grips. Also, aluminum paddle shifters. Aluminum paddle shifters out of the ADX. Love to see it. Some manufacturers in this class will still give you plastic paddle shifters, which feel very, very cheap. Unfortunately, though, it kind of all goes downhill from here. And I wouldn't say this about the HRV, and I probably wouldn't say this about the Acura ADX at $37,000 for the base trim. Take a look at the digital gauge cluster, infotainment system, and then your button layout. It is all Honda. And at $44,000 for our model today, you're cross-shopping this with the Volvo XC40, BMW X1, Audi Q3, and more specifically with that Audi Q3, that does not share technology with a Volkswagen Taos. So it doesn't feel cheap for the interior. The ADX is just a HRV in a business suit, and that's where, to me, it kind of goes wrong. I don't mind this digital gauge cluster. It's easy to get used to. You can customize it. You can showcase all the information you want on this display, and I do think a lot of people, especially at around $37,000 for the base, are going to love this interior. But when you're comparing this to the rivals that are now luxury brands, that's where I think the ADX is going to have a bit of an issue trying to compete with those manufacturers, at least at this price point. But it still functions all the same as the HRV. So if you're someone hopping in from the HRV, you want something a bit more mature, you're going to find yourself right at home here. Then taking a look at the infotainment system, the bigger difference here, and I think this is where it is worth its money, is that you are going to have Google integration. And this is the only trim that gets that. So you can have Google Maps, Google Play Store, Google Assistant. You're also going to have, of course, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility. Also, another thing too that's really nice to have here in the ADX is the Bang & Olufsen sound system, which really amplifies the audio of your favorite music. I went out for a drive in this crossover yesterday, just blasting my playlist, and it was really a nice experience inside this crossover. So the sound system is another really good feature to have in this vehicle. But just like we see in the HRV, this all functions the same. You're going to have all your widgets here on the main head unit for vehicle settings, trip computer, general settings, Bluetooth audio. It is all right here, and it's very easy to get used to, and better yet, it's responsive. On the left side of the screen will be quick access icons for your Google Assistant, Google Maps, AM, FM, your Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and then also you can add a favorite tab. And then further to the left is going to be your home button, back, physical volume knob, and your tuning buttons. So you're still going to have somewhat of an analog experience here inside the ADX. When you place the ADX in reverse, you are going to receive a top view camera. Nice. And you're also going to have a rear backup camera with trajectory, which is multi-angled, so much like we see from the HRV as well. Honda's pretty good here with their backup cameras, giving you better visibility when you are parking on safe streets or parking in a garage. Continuing on, beneath the head unit, you're going to find the defined vent design here that we see on a Civic and other Honda products. What I really like, though, is this aluminum trim just beneath that carries through the center console. That's a nice touch. You are going to have your buttons and dials for your dual zone climate control, your AC, front rear defrosters, fan speed, fan direction, and heated and ventilated seats. So a tactile experience here in a market that is going very digital. For the center console, you're going to find two USB-C outlets, a 12-volt outlet, wireless phone charging pad, a cup holder. Then you have your traditional gear shifter and your drive mode selector, where you can go sport, normal, comfort, or snow. And you will have an individual mode as well, where you can fully customize the driving experience of this crossover. You also have your auto start stop, hill descent control, electronic parking brake, and auto vehicle hold. And then we have another cup holder, so a bit of a split design there. One thing you're not going to see, though, out of the ADX is the floating bridge that is iconic in the HRV for the current generation. Instead, you're just going to have this sportier look on the passenger side, and there's no storage compartment beneath this center console. For the center storage compartment, you're going to have enough room. Actually, it's pretty deep here for some smaller items, maybe even a couple small water bottles, obviously smartphones, wallets, so pretty nice to see there. And then to round out the front seating area, above is going to be a panoramic moonroof, which brings in a lot of natural light to the interior. Then for passengers in the second row, you're looking at a respectable 37.7 inches of legroom. It's really not bad for a subcompact crossover such as this. In fact, there is plenty of room back here where you can have average-sized adults and obviously smaller children as well. Probably even more impressive is the amount of headroom that you have back here, despite the fact that you do have a lower roof line and we had that panoramic moonroof. So tall passengers will not be hitting their head on the headliner, but the headliner is somewhat soft here. Also, we don't have an aggressive center hump here inside the ADX, so I think you can try squeezing in a third person in the center here, which gives you a bit more flexibility out of the ADX. Also, you will have two center mounted air vents, so on a nice warm daily today, you have that nice cool breeze making its way back here, two USB-C outlets. And then to round out the second row seating area, you are going to receive a center armrest with two cup holders. Returning to the rear fascia to take a look at the cargo area out of the Acura ADX. Since we are going to have the top trim today, we're going to receive a power liftgate. It's also hands-free as well, so a bit more convenience. And inside, behind the second row seats, you're looking at right on 24.5 cubic feet of room. 24.5 cubic feet of room is right in line with a Mercedes-Benz GLA, Audi Q3, BMW X1. So more than enough here. And again, it gives you more of that hot hatch appeal and also an extra layer of practicality that maybe some of you are looking for here out of a family-friendly and maybe even a city-friendly vehicle. When you lower the second row seats, you're looking at right on 55 cubic feet of room. Once again, not going to be the most practical option here at this particular price point. If you're someone who's looking for practicality, you'd probably be better served going with the Honda CR-V. But out of the ADX here, you're going to have that flexibility that I think a lot of you are most certainly looking for here out of a relatively affordable luxury subcompact crossover. Best of all though, beneath the floor mat, you are going to find a spare tire. So if you encounter a flat on those road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. To answer the question, is the Acura ADX just a rebadged Honda HR-V? Well, aesthetically and superficially, it is. Particularly for the interior, this is all Honda. I do want to go on record and say, though, that the HR-V is a great subcompact crossover in its class, especially coming in below $30,000 to start. Its size, its practicality, and the fact you get all-wheel drive provides all the essentials, and it is very competitive in its market. However, for the Acura ADX, is this beneficial? Or are these all drawbacks that's going to come back to bite Acura in the future? Sales figures would say that it's been a success, that buyers are looking for a vehicle like this because the ADX is outselling most of its rivals. And a lot of it does come down to the pricing, where you're looking at a starting cost of $37,000 with all-wheel drive. That severely undercuts Audi, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, even Volvo. And the only other luxury subcompact in this market that would match pricing on the lower end would be the Lexus UX. And that isn't really a popular vehicle in the US. And it's also hybrid only, which is a bit of a surprise. Seeing as though that Americans are looking for efficiency, you would think the UX would be a bit more competitive in this space, and it just isn't. Also, Acura did infuse their own DNA into this platform, where it's not going to be a carbon copy mechanically. Best of all, they dropped in a different engine, the 1.5-liter turbocharged four-cylinder engine that's from the Honda Civic Si. This gives you 190 horsepower, 179 pound-feet of torque. It's going to be a bit more agile, a bit more fun than the HR-V's 158 horsepower, and that would not sell well here at around $37,000 or $44,400 that we have here out of the ADX A-Spec. However, this powertrain does have its own set of pros and cons, and I'll get into that in a minute, because I don't think the 1.5 is the best application for the ADX at this particular price point. We need a bit more, and in fact, it's not a big ask because Honda does offer a powertrain that would be suitable for this platform, and it is used in other vehicles that are sitting on this same chassis. But out of the 1.5 though, you get a bit more engagement, it's more fun, and it's quicker off the line than the HR-V. Pairing this with the great handling characteristics that Acura has really injected into this platform and model makes it quite maneuverable, very city-friendly for sure, and also, dare I say, engaging on a winding back road. And that's where the ADX is a bit of a surprise. That's where I've actually really enjoyed this vehicle. The back roads is where this crossover should live at all times. But coming back to the cons though, the 1.5 is still very slow. You're looking at a 0 to 60 time of around 8.5 to 9 seconds. This is well below what you're going to see from rivals, even the Volvo XC40. And in that regard, it's just not competitive. You can pin the gas pedal to the floor and there's just no response. And pairing it with the CVT, it's not going to be really engaging when you are under heavy accelerations. Yes, you have the paddle shifters to mimic the gear shifts, but it's just not going to be there. And that is one of the bigger letdowns. What would actually fix all of this would be the 2-liter hybrid 4-cylinder out of the Honda Civic. And I'd really like to ask Honda and Acura as to why they're not giving us that particular powertrain, because if you're looking at 200 horsepower, 232 pound-feet of torque, now you got a car that can really scoot along, and best of all, it would be more efficient. When you're looking at around 25 miles per gallon in the city, 30 miles per gallon on the highway, yeah, that's okay, but it could be better. And that, I think, is the main takeaway here out of the ADX, that it could be better. And I don't know if Acura or Honda needs to be pressured into changing anything, because When you take a look at the sales figures, obviously Americans like what this vehicle's offering. Throughout my week, this vehicle's been averaging around 27 to 29 miles per gallon, which, all right, isn't the worst, but again, it could be better. And a lot of this is because with the 1.5, you're constantly on throttle to get this thing moving. And then when you're on throttle, you see the fuel economy numbers drop, and it's like, oh, here we go. But making up for it is the engagement and the handling. And even when you're in normal mode, the steering is decently weighted, and you also get some feedback that a lot of vehicles, including the HR-V, are just not going to provide. And that is one thing that I can really appreciate here out of this vehicle, that Acura didn't just make a carbon copy of the HR-V. They're going to throw on new front and rear fascias, maybe even more comfortable interior pieces. No, they went out there with the suspension and the handling, giving you a fun factor that shouldn't be possible in a vehicle like this. And this alone gives you the incentive to choosing the ADX over the HR-V. And the fact that you're going to see this across the board for all three trims makes it really competitive and compelling at around $37,000 for the base trim. It's pinned to the floor, finally at speed. And that was only to 45 miles an hour. And that, again, is really what has kind of bothered me here about this vehicle. Just because it feels sports-tuned, it has the quality of a Mazda CX-30, and I'm not getting the performance of a CX-30 or performance from, say, a Volvo XC40. And that's what's kind of really setting things back here on my time with the Acura ADX, because it's just like, we could get more out of this platform. The bigger mystery here, and probably more importantly if you are currently in this market and you're questioning, all right, what is a competitor that I can compare this to, is where does this vehicle actually place in its segment? Is it a traditional luxury subcompact? Is this in the same conversation as the Audi Q3, Mercedes-Benz GLA, BMW X1, or maybe even a Volvo XC40? In some ways, this almost takes the place of the Infiniti QX50. Similar setup, CVT, luxury brand. It's almost like that, but it's more affordable. On the lower end at 37 grand, you could cross-shop this with a Mazda CX-30. And I would look at the ADX as being a continuation of the HR-V, even though it's not exactly the same. It's not a twin to the HR-V. It's just a continuation. And in some ways, it's almost like what a refined Subaru Crosstrek would feel like. So pricing-wise, it's in this middle ground where it's more refined, more luxurious than a mainstream subcompact, but not as expensive as the traditional German and European rivals. And I also think it's nicer than the Lexus UX. It's more practical than the Lexus UX. So it's kind of one of these situations where if you like an HR-V EXL, but you want just a bit more bang for your buck, that's where the ADX really slots into place, and in some ways is worth the price of admission. On the higher end though, with the ADX A-Spec Advanced like we have here today, that's where I'm having a bit more difficulty understanding the price point. Because for the two lower trims, it's a great value. Well-equipped models, you're not breaking the bank for a luxury subcompact. At this price point though, we need a hybrid four-cylinder. We need that hybrid four-cylinder out of the Civic. It would address all the shortcomings out of this generation. And I'm sure that Acura and Honda have a great explanation as to why they haven't dropped that in yet. Mike, we would love to, but that isn't in the cards for this generation. And looking at what Honda and Acura have planned over the next 2 years, that would seem valid, because it seems like for 2028, there's a lot of new vehicles, a lot of new products that are coming into the pipeline, right? The Ridgeline, that might have a hybrid powertrain. The Civic Si is not being produced anymore for EPA regulation purposes. Maybe we're going to get a different engine out of the Si in the future, and that might be exactly why we're waiting for a hybrid out of the ADX, out of the Integra. So that's where it all makes sense. And I don't think that Honda needs to rush and drop in a hybrid four-cylinder looking at the popularity not only 2 years into production. It's just that I think with the hybrid powertrain, this vehicle would make a lot more sense, and it would be far more well-rounded and suitable for American buyers, especially with the fuel efficiency, the pricing, the performance. It would just check off a lot of boxes that haven't been checked off yet out of the ADX currently. However, where we stand today in 2026 with the ADX, if you're someone who likes the HRV but you want just a bit more, you want refinement, you want luxury, you want creature comforts and amenities, and you want performance, you're not paying a boatload extra of cash to get a vehicle like this from Acura, and that's where the value is out of this crossover. It's the lower end, not the higher end, but either way, this is a winner in its class because it undercuts all of its competitors, and it does just enough to make sense for many Americans in this market looking for something just a bit more than mainstream crossovers. So guys, let me know what you think here about the Acura ADX. Are we on the same page that we need to see a hybrid powertrain under the hood of this model, and maybe even some more changes to the interior where it doesn't feel or look like a Honda HRV? Let me know in the comment section below. But guys, once again, thanks so much for watching, take care, and I will see you guys next time.